O registro fóssil contém restos de diversas formas de vida. Algumas delas ainda existem hoje, como por exemplo as tartarugas marinhas. Aqui podemos ver restos de fragmentos fossilizados de um osso de tartaruga marinha e também os crocodilos, achados aqui no Vale de Toro, na Bolívia. Mas também existem outros fósseis, um pouquinho diferentes, porque são de animais que já não existem no nosso planeta. Qual será a razão da extinção destes seres? Será que o dilúvio registrado na Bíblia, no livro de Gênesis, ele é a única catástrofe responsável pela extinção destes animais?
One of the things that I find fascinating out of the Dino Dig is trying to figure out how these dinosaurs were buried. Now, the typical explanation for that bone bed would be that some dinosaurs were crossing the river and they drowned and they died and then they got washed downstream. And over many, many years, we have slowly accumulated these bone beds. But then you have to ask yourself the question, does the evidence really support that explanation or does it not? And when you look at Hansen Research Station and you look at the variety of quarries where we're working, when you look at some of the pictures of how those bones were deposited, we find large bones at the bottom, medium-sized bones higher up, and small bones up at the top. We call that a graded bone bed. And so these are obviously creatures that died, decomposed, disarticulated, their bones came apart, and then they were washed somewhere, and based on the size and weight of those bones, they settled out in different layers. That really looks like one catastrophic event rather than many years, many different dinosaurs. There's really strong evidence out there in that bone bed for catastrophic burial in a single event rather than over many millions of years slowly accumulating these dinosaurs.
So we have been looking at these sedimentary rocks for the last 20 years actually. We've gone through tens of thousands of meters of sediment, looking at them to see whether they indicate that there was time or no time. And in the vast majority of cases, we find no evidence for the disruption of the sediments from the time they were laid down until we have come to look at them. This is impossible to reconcile with long periods of time. So it's a very strong indicator that the standard model does not give us a good model for what we see. In fact, it is consistent with a global flood and rapid deposition, but it is inconsistent with deposition over millions of years. If these rocks accumulated over a long period of time, like millions of years, we would expect to see a lot of activity in the rocks like we see today, like animals living in the rocks. If they were deposited underwater, you would expect marine worms to be digesting the material in the sediments and stirring them up and changing them. However, if it was deposited quickly in just a year's time, you would expect to see very little of this kind of activity. So we have been looking through these rocks, trying to find out whether they show evidence of this kind of churning up of the sediments after they were deposited. And we have studied tens of thousands of meters of rock, looking to see if they show evidence of rapid deposition or slow deposition. And in the great majority of cases, we find no evidence for the passage of time.
Compreender o tempo decorrido estudando as pistas impressas no registro fóssil inclui contemplar além dos fósseis em si, desvendando na forma em que estão enterrados e na natureza dos sedimentos que os contêm, mas pistas sobre os fenômenos que tiveram que ocorrer para que hoje estejam assim.
The bones we have here on the ranch that we are excavating are mostly found in a mudstone, which is a very fine-grained sediment. In fact, one of the marvels of the sedimentary process is that you have these giant bones up to 1.5 meters long in sediment that's 10,000ths of a millimeter across. Very, very fine mud and clay. And how do you transport big giant bones in with little tiny particles of sediment? So you have the tiny particles of sediment in the clay, and then you have the giant particles of the bones. And normally in sedimentology, things are sorted according to size and mass. And so it's unusual to find big giant things like this in this very fine-grained sediment. The only model that can explain this is if this mass of sediment, this mud, this clay, had bones that were on top of it or in it, and it became resuspended, maybe by an earthquake or something else, so that water got back in the sediment, and then the whole mass traveled as a debris flow out into the basin and carried everything at once as a single catastrophic process and deposited these bones in a graded bed with big bones at the bottom and little bones at the top, all in a matrix made out of clay-sized particles. And this is very unusual in terms of normal sedimentology, so it requires something extraordinary to explain it. We also know that the lance formation, the layers that these bones are in, has many other evidences of catastrophic deposition. Very rapid 5-meter layers that show that they were deposited so fast that the water didn't have time to escape before an earthquake occurred or something that shook it. So the layers go like this, and they show this undulation, what we call a seismite. Seismite is a layer of rock that's a layer of sediment that's been disrupted by an earthquake. And so we find evidence not only for a lot of earthquakes, but that these earthquakes occurred before the sediment had time to settle. So very rapid deposition, and then earthquakes, very rapid deposition, earthquakes. And this is over a wide area, this whole deposit, the lance formation.
If we look at the way that sediments get deposited today, they are fairly small and local. Rivers deposit sediments in a small area. They don't cover thousands of square miles. I mean, the river is a strip of land, and it has deposits beside it that have formed by the river. When we look at the rocks in the geologic column, they are generally very different. Many of them are huge. They cover thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of square miles. So there's something very different that produced those rocks. Much more catastrophic, much more, just a whole larger scale. We've never seen a global flood, so we don't know exactly what to expect. But when we look at those rock layers, like the Morrison Formation, that's famous for dinosaurs, it starts in Canada and goes almost to Mexico, and it's several states wide. There's nothing happening today that forming something like that. That was a very large, continental scale at least, process that formed that rock layer, and that's quite typical of the rocks in the geologic column. And so there's many reasons to think that these were formed catastrophically, which means on a large scale and rapidly.
Processo rápido que modificou a geologia do nosso planeta. Uma deposição catastrófica que sepultou milhares de espécies de animais, dissipando-os para sempre da face da Terra. Mas pode do caos surgir a ordem? Pode a ordem que vemos na coluna geológica ter alguma explicação, sendo que foi produzida em meio destas drásticas condições?
The order in the fossil record is a real thing. They actually really discovered this before all of the ideas dealing with evolution in deep time. They were able to trace rock layers across England and into Europe and things using fossils. So this is a real phenomenon, and as such, we need to consider that as evidence as we think about Earth history. So the question is, how do you make the fossil record? That's what everybody wants to know. You've got the naturalistic evolutionary opinion on it, that this is a record of evolving animals over time. But as creationists, we have a timeline that's given to us in Scripture about original creation, a time before the flood, and then after the flood. And so in terms of understanding it, a lot of critics have said, oh, you can't make ordered things in a worldwide flood. It's just going to mix everything together. Well, the first issue is, I'm not necessarily sure we know exactly what would happen in a worldwide flood. I mean, we've never had that before in recent history. We'd all be dead if it did happen. So it's hard to say exactly what would happen there. But what I will say is that, the order we do find, it would make sense in light of a flood, that you do find marine animals first as their bodies would be washed in and deposited. You find sort of more lowland type coastal animals, things like amphibians, and a lot of our Carboniferous and Permian reptiles might be buried there. And you have dinosaurs. A lot of us think that the Cenozoic rocks are after the flood, would have been deposited then. They're much more local deposits, and so there would be more time represented there.
The geologic column is made up of different layers of rock. There are different layers of rock in each of those units. These rocks are indicating they came from different source areas. Some of them are sandstone, some are mud, some are limestone, and that means they must have come from different source areas. If the rocks are coming from different source areas, then they might have brought the remains of dinosaurs that were different. And we know, even though we don't think the dinosaurs lived here, we know that the dinosaurs had to be transported in here if the flood is the explanation we're using, because we are sitting on top of 10,000 feet of other sediments that don't have dinosaurs in them. So if this all accumulated during the flood, then the dinosaurs must have been brought in from somewhere else. Some of them doubtless were dead and were maybe floating in the water, but others of these dinosaurs were still alive, and they must have actually they left some foot tracks just a few miles from here. So we know that while most of these dinosaurs were dead, there were still some alive. And this makes the picture even more interesting. But it's possible that the different values of sedimentation made the smaller dinosaurs that walked on two legs die first or be buried first, and then the bigger ones might have stayed around longer or floated longer. And then in the upper part, we have some that may have had other characteristics that allowed them to be brought out here farther into the basin. It seems like each unit, the Triassic is over here near the west coast, and then the Jurassic covers a little bit more, and then the Cretaceous even more. So it's like there were successive waves of sediment influx that brought these dinosaurs with them.
Ainda que para muitos a explicação da extinção dos dinossauros pelo impacto de um meteorito seja a única teoria válida e indiscutível, isto está longe de ser real. Os fenômenos que vemos estampados no registro fóssil podem também encontrar uma explicação em outro evento catastrófico. A teoria da extinção dos dinossauros no dilúvio do Gênesis, seja que este inclua um impacto ou não, pode ser considerada como uma hipótese plausível que merece consideração. Inclusive, a possibilidade de um meteorito impactando a Terra não é necessariamente incompatível com o modelo bíblico do dilúvio.
Speaking of the flood that's described in the Bible, the Bible talks about 40 days and 40 nights of rain. And some people may think, well, 40 days and 40 nights, that'd make a disastrous flood, but it'd be over. And that's not what the description is. If you read the description, the waters increased for 40 days and 40 nights, but by that time now they're covering the earth. Then you have something like 150 days when these waters are moving back and forth. So now you have huge masses of water flowing across the surface of the earth, and they're not coming up against a continent and stopping. At least in some cases, there is no continent sticking up above the water to stop them. So you have currents going all the way around the world, and they could be flowing at hundreds of kilometers per hour. And even if they're not going so fast, they would be going fast. And when water goes fast, it carries huge amounts of sediment with it. And so that, now we don't know, but we wonder, could that be the reason that when we look at Cretaceous sediments and those below that, we often find geological formations that are very widespread. Sometimes we even find similar kinds of rocks and fossils in different continents. Could it be that this flood actually carried things around so far that now we find them on different continents?
Esta grande catástrofe, ela tem dimensões às vezes muito maiores do que nós costumamos imaginar. Veja que acredita-se que nós tínhamos nesse momento um grande continente, que poderia ser até o próprio continente Pangeia, e esse continente se fragmentou. Isso traz consequências globais, porque o deslocamento desses continentes altera as correntes marinhas, altera a circulação dos oceanos, altera o clima rapidamente logo depois. Enfim, estão associados a esse deslocamento uma quantidade intensa de vulcanismo em todos os continentes. São placas se movendo, é o oceano se abrindo, a produção de calor é muito grande, portanto, é um evento, na verdade, como se fosse uma hecatombe mesmo, é muito mais do que uma catástrofe. A Terra toda estava, vamos dizer assim, em convulsão. E a vida, às vezes, é muito frágil nesse contexto todo. Terremotos, vulcanismo, ondas invadindo os continentes, mares escorrendo sobre as montanhas. Isso são coisas em proporções globais. E a vida, por ser muito frágil, dificilmente subsistiria a eventos dessa natureza. Por isso que esse contexto global de uma catástrofe muito mais ampla poderia explicar melhor a extinção de praticamente tudo que existia naquela época. E a gente observa isso quando nós olhamos o registro fóssil. O registro fóssil tem várias extinções marcadas ao longo dele, que se nós formos olhar o que cada extinção teria produzido, nós vamos perceber que praticamente não teria sobrado nada da face da Terra. Nós pensamos que uma grande catástrofe poderia explicar isso de uma maneira muito boa.
In the sediments above the Cretaceous, you don't see that so much. It seems like the continents have come up or the waters come down so that the continents are now showing, and most of the sediments above the Cretaceous, that's in the Cenozoic sediments, most of them look like they were formed in regular basins on continents and things like that. So some people have proposed that particular level in the geologic column is approximately where the waters began to recede again toward the end of the flood. We don't know that. We just are looking for some kind of an idea. Can we relate the sediments to what the Bible's talking about? And that's one suggestion. We are not going to propose that that's what the Bible says, but we're going to try to say, well, maybe this is what happened. Maybe the flood came up and it deposited these layers, and then afterwards, it left a different pattern. Well, it does make a little bit of sense, but there's a lot of questions we still don't know.
A maioria dos cientistas criacionistas acreditam que os dinossauros desapareceram durante ou pouco após do dilúvio de Gênesis. Existem aqueles que pensam que os dinossauros sobreviveram ao dilúvio e que desapareceram pouco depois, enquanto tentavam se ajustar ao novo ambiente. Poderiam ser estes dinossauros pós-diluvianos as criaturas estranhas mencionadas na Bíblia? Foram estes animais gigantes e assustadores os que inspiraram as lendas sobre dragões ou monstros marinhos presentes em grande parte das culturas mais antigas do nosso mundo?
Os cientistas criacionistas, eles acreditam que boa parte das rochas sedimentares que nós temos, principalmente no que nós chamamos de Fanerozoico, e os fósseis teriam se formado numa grande catástrofe que seria o próprio dilúvio bíblico. Dentre esses animais estão os muito falados dinossauros. E alguns têm dúvida, os dinossauros existiram? Existiram com certeza. Nós temos fósseis inteiros de dinossauros. Portanto, não há como negar que esses animais existiram. Eles sobreviveram ao dilúvio? E aqui é um aspecto importante. Nós não temos evidências físicas, eu digo empíricas, de que esses animais sobreviveram ao dilúvio. Ou seja, quando nós observamos na coluna geológica, nós só encontramos restos de dinossauros naquelas rochas que nós chamamos do Mesozoico, que inclui o Triássico, o Jurássico e o Cretácico. Portanto, se alguém quer procurar dinossauro algum dia, vá nessas rochas. A chance é muito maior do que procurar rochas do Paleozoico ou do Cenozoico. Se você for lá, não vai encontrar nada. Quiser procurar dinossauro, vá nas rochas do Mesozoico. Portanto, se nós considerarmos que essa grande catástrofe ela terminou um pouco depois dessas rochas do Mesozoico, com certeza esses animais não entraram na arca. Ou se entraram, eles saíram e logo depois eles foram extintos, porque nós não temos até hoje evidências físicas de que eles existiram depois do Mesozoico.
So extinction is typically easier to talk about today. So an animal like a dodo bird or a thylacine, which is a Tasmanian tiger, those animals have gone extinct in human history. So we can say, hey, we stopped seeing them. We stopped seeing them for 50 years, they're probably extinct. When you're talking about a fossil, the issue is you're looking in the fossil record, and let's say you find Triceratops as a dinosaur. You find it in these specific layers, and then you stop finding it. It's gone. The typical interpretation with that would be it's extinct, right? It lived in this time, it doesn't live in this time. Now, there are other reasons an animal might not get fossilized. Maybe they're very diminished in number, so it's unlikely they'd be a fossil. Maybe they moved into areas that you can't make a fossil of them. Just for whatever reason, they're in an unlikely spot to be fossilized. So an example of this would be the coelacanth, is a fish that lives in the Indian Ocean today. There's two different species, one off of Madagascar, one off of Indonesia. And these fish, we find fossils of them in the Cretaceous and back in the Devonian, which is in the Paleozoic. But there are almost no fossils from the Cretaceous until now, yet the fish is alive out there. So they just lived in an unlikely spot to be fossilized. Now, we're pretty confident dinosaurs are extinct because we don't see them anywhere, like I said. So that means at some point they were alive and now they're not. What happened? My suspicion is, I think an asteroid really did hit there, not an asteroid necessarily, but some kind of a body hit the Earth, and we do have that crater, we do have an iridium spike all around the world, those kinds of things. So that really happened. Now what happened to the dinosaurs and these other animals? Well, I think that dinosaurs were air-breathing animals that lived on land, which means they would have been brought on the ark. So if these rocks are representative of flood deposits, then there were dinosaurs that lived through the flood, I think, and they would have gotten off the ark. And for whatever reason, they just weren't successful. The new world that existed then just couldn't keep dinosaurs around for whatever reason. They weren't equipped for this new environment. They struggled with post-flood catastrophes, with climate change, I'm not really sure, but, and because they died so quickly, they didn't leave a lot of opportunity to make fossils, or they lived in areas that weren't exactly fossil producing. So I think that dinosaurs did go extinct sometime after the flood. It's possible that our dragon stories that we have in different cultures are leftover memories of dinosaurs either before the flood or right after the flood, but they're gone, they died out, and the mystery that's there, I think that's something creation science can work on. One of the tricks would be trying to look for possible dinosaur fossils and layers that are just after the flood. Those might exist out there, I don't know, but it'd be something worth investigating.
Nós não temos evidências empíricas de que eles existiram depois do dilúvio. É claro que nós encontramos nas culturas antigas imagens, desenhos fazendo referência aos dinossauros, mas nós não podemos tomar isso aí como evidência direta. Isso são evidências indiretas. Por exemplo, os dragões chineses e alguns desenhos de dinossauros ou de seres semelhantes a dinossauros em outras culturas. Mas nós não podemos usar isso como uma prova ou uma evidência de que eles existiram. Nós temos que encontrar realmente restos desses animais ou uma evidência da atividade deles, como por exemplo uma pegada. Isso sim, essas informações nós não temos a respeito dos dinossauros, portanto nós cremos que eles não teriam sobrevivido ao dilúvio. É possível que dentro daqueles animais que entraram na arca, eles não estivessem incluídos. Tinham répteis ali, que estariam representando o grupo dos répteis. A Bíblia não diz nome de animal, ela diz grupos, répteis, aves, mamíferos. Então, entraram um grupo de répteis, com certeza, mas é bem provável que esses animais não tiveram acesso à arca, e se não tiveram acesso, eles foram extintos durante essa grande catástrofe.
Compreender plenamente o que foi que aconteceu antes, durante e depois desta grande catástrofe, sem dúvida, ainda requer muita pesquisa. Estudo que demanda oportunidade, busca que irá se perpetuar através da energia e conhecimento das novas gerações, que aplicando uma ciência séria e responsável, ajudarão a responder aquelas perguntas que ainda permanecem sem respostas.
There's a lot of differing opinions about how this all worked out, and one of the things we need to remember about creationist geology and paleontology is that these are very young sciences. We have had creationists, geologists, and paleontologists back in the 1800s, but they weren't doing a lot of the big picture thinking that we're doing today. And when you compare what's going on in evolutionary paleontology and geology versus creationist, I mean, evolutionary paleontology and geology, you've had several hundred years to do this. You've got tons and tons of money, tons and tons of people, and so you can come up with some really good models. What we're working with is, realistically, the past 30, 40 years of having some real qualified people in these fields as creationists, with still very few people and very little money available. So it makes sense that we don't have as good of models yet, we don't have as good of understanding. But I think we can get there. I don't think it's impossible in any way, shape, or form. I think what we're looking at is the birth of kind of a new science. And as we get more and more scientists that are qualified, that are creationists, we're going to see things grow and our understanding develop and come up with some really good models of Earth history.